Hey guys, thanks for joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. If you're returning to the channel, it's great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, we appreciate having you aboard and we hope you like what you hear. So, our podcast is for people that want to learn something new or make themselves a little bit better every day. So today we're going to talk about the U.S. form of government. And there was tons of talk, and there always is when elections come up, especially when we've had such close elections over the last several, I guess, decades. You know, the 2000 election was close, the 16 election was close, the 20 election was close, the 24 election, not so close, but kind of close. A lot of states were kind of tight. And so there's been a lot of talk about democracy. And the United States, since we've adopted the Constitution, has never been a democracy. It really wasn't a democracy under the Articles of Confederation before that either. But there's largely this word democracy gets thrown around. The word democracy appears nowhere in the Constitution. It does not. That word is not once in the Constitution. The word republic is in the Constitution several times because our country was formed as a democratic republic whereby people elect representatives to kind of run the country. And that's very important. And it was very deliberate by our founding fathers. And we found a good video. We like PragerU. We think they do a good job of being fact-based and presenting you information so that you can educate yourself and make your own decisions based on the information that you have that's accurate. And so we're going to watch a video today that's presented by a professor of jurisprudence at James Madison. So jurisprudence is law. This is someone that has studied the Constitution, is very familiar with it, with the drafting of the Constitution and the ratification of the Constitution. And we think he does a real good job of laying this out. It's not a long video. We'll pause it a few times in between and interject some thoughts for you to consider as we watch it. But with that said, let's just jump into it right here.
At the close of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, legend has it that a woman called out to Benjamin Franklin to ask what kind of government the delegates had created. Franklin responded, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." A republic? Shouldn't Franklin have said, a democracy? Isn't that what we have in the United States? Most people today would say yes. After all, if our country isn't a democracy, what is it? It's not a dictatorship, the rule of one man, or an oligarchy ruled by a small group. In America, the people are in charge. That's literally what democracy means in the original Greek. Demos, kratos. The people, demos, rule, kratos. But let's pause for a moment and consider more deeply what the word means in practice and why the delegates in Philadelphia rejected it. That's right, rejected it. Our government was established by a national charter,
So that's important to note there. Like, they considered democracy. They considered a pure democracy and rejected it. So when you hear people talk about, oh, the founding fathers intended for it to be a democracy, no, they did not. That's false. It was very seriously considered and it was rejected by the folks that drew up the charter for the Constitution. So just keep going here.
Constitution of the United States. We are governed by the institutions and according to the rules and principles created and adopted when our forebears ratified that document, making it the supreme law of the land. Are those institutions, properly speaking, democratic? The men who bequeathed our form of government to us, those we call our founding fathers, didn't see it that way. They understood the institutions established by the Constitution to be Republican. In fact, though the founders believed in...
So that's not Republican as in the Republican Party. It's Republican as the government is a republic. Important to note the difference. So just don't get confused there.
Of the people, by the people, for the people, as Abraham Lincoln put it in the Gettysburg Address. They did not believe in pure or unrestricted democracy. They feared that democracy, strictly speaking, contained within it the impulse to mob rule, the stifling of civil liberty, the trampling by majorities of the rights of minorities. To put it more bluntly, pure democracy frightened them. So while they built into the Constitution significant democratic elements, they also built in non-democratic features to protect liberty and prevent tyranny.
So that, to me, is by far the most important part. And the way I try to describe it to people when they're talking about democracy is if there's three animals, two of them are wolves and one of them are sheep, and they vote on what's for dinner, guess what's for dinner? It's the sheep. And that's the problem with the democracy, is if you go back through history and look at pure democracies, every single one of them is wound up in mob rule, where a group gets one more vote than the minority, and then they force their own agenda onto the minority, and it inevitably leads to tyranny. It leads to the loss of rights by the minority. It leads to persecution of the minority, and it's a bad road to go down. The founding fathers knew that, and they were very intentional when they selected and drew up our form of government, because they wanted to avoid that exact situation. So keep that in mind. Democracy will always lead to mob rule. Democracy will always reduce liberty, and democracy will always lead to tyranny. There's not been an instance in our world's history, not the nation, the entire world, for the history of recorded time that we know about, where democracy did not wind up in that spot. So let's keep going here.
It wasn't simply that they favored representative government over direct democracy, though they did. It's that they rejected the idea that the majority wins was by definition the just outcome. Indeed, in what is perhaps the most famous of the 85 Federalist Papers, Federalist 10, James Madison, precisely in distinguishing a democracy, which he did not favor, from a republic, which he did, noted that a crucial advantage of republicanism is to refine the public views by passing them through the medium of a chosen body of citizens whose wisdom may best discern the true interests of the country. And so we have representative government. And more than that, we have a bicameral, that is, two-tiered legislature. A Congress with a highly democratic House of Representatives and a not very democratic Senate. Therefore, California, with its massive population, has 52 representatives in the House.
And this part's really important. So the bicameral Congress, where one side, the House of Representatives, is based on the total number of citizens per state. And that's why there's a census every 10 years, is because we need to know where people live so that we can accurately reflect that in the House of Representatives. So when the census is done and all of the people are counted, we wind up shifting seats in the House from states that lost population to states that gained population. So at one point, California was a little gold rush state out on the West Coast and did not have the massive amounts of people it has now. It's now up to 52 representatives in the House, like it's shown on the screen. That's happened over a period of time as the census has shown that there's more population in that state. Florida, Texas, New York, all the large states. And then you flip over to the Senate, and there's equal representation by each state. Now, some people claim that's not fair, but I would encourage you to think, what if, and it talks about it a little bit longer in the video, what if you could win the presidency simply by getting the most people to vote for you? Do you think anyone would ever campaign in Wisconsin, for example, which was a swing state, or Michigan, which was a swing state, or North Carolina, which was a swing state? Probably not. You certainly would never campaign in a Wyoming or Nebraska or Vermont or those types of places. So it's very important that this bicameral House of Congress was set up intentionally the way it is to make sure everybody had a voice and the government had to think about all of its citizens. So
Wyoming has one. Yet Wyoming has 2 senators, the same number as California and every other state. A pure Democrat would say that's unfair. Each Wyoming resident has far more power than every Californian. But a Republican would say, well, we aren't and shouldn't be a pure democracy. If we were, large population states like California would overwhelm the needs and interests of small population states like Wyoming. That's why we're called the United States of America. Each state has its own separate identity, holds its own separate elections. Just as we don't want one person or small group of people to dominate our government, we don't want one state or a few states to dominate our government. A republic is a way of diffusing power, and a brilliant one at that. We see something similar in the Constitution's procedures for choosing a president. An obvious possibility would have been by a national popular vote. The founders wisely decided against this option. Rather, they created an electoral college to protect the interests of the less populous states. Even today, their decision makes sense. As my Princeton colleague, Professor Alan Gelzo, observes, a direct national popular vote would incentivize campaigns to focus almost exclusively on densely populated urban areas. The Electoral College system incentivizes candidates to court voters more broadly, making presidential elections more fully national.
And so that is terribly important from our perspective because we don't want to disenfranchise people because they don't live in a city. And that's exactly what a national popular vote would do. So you hear a lot of crying and complaining around the Electoral College, especially when the national popular vote goes to one candidate, but the Electoral College is won by a different candidate. And that happened in 2016 when Trump won the Electoral College and Clinton won the national vote. Also happened in 2000 when Gore won the national popular vote and Bush won the Electoral College. That's not the only two times it's happened in history. We did a podcast episode on that. Rutherford B. Hayes was installed in office when the national popular vote was split. John Quincy Adams was as well. So this is not a new scenario for the United States. And the Electoral College has always been the way in which we elect a president. So the analogy we use to explain to people who complain about the national popular vote versus the Electoral College would be to go to a basketball game and say, well, I know the other team scored 10 more points than we did, but we actually got more rebounds, and rebounds are way more important than points. So we really should have won the game because we got more rebounds. The rules of engagement were decided long before the election started. It wasn't sprung on anybody. Everybody knew what they were. Everybody knows how we do this. And simply because it doesn't break your way is not a valid reason, in our opinion, to blow up 250 years of history. And look what we've built the nation into from where it started. A lot of things are right about the way we run our government. A lot of things are wrong, too. There's way too, in our opinion, there's way too much money and influence in politics now. One of the reasons we're excited about Trump and some of the things that are novel about his approach here, like the DOGE Department of Government Efficiency, that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are heading up, even though they're not in the government. They're not taking a salary. They're not a part of the government. They're not a part of his cabinet, but they're going to make recommendations. But even there, it's a good example of why democracy isn't good, because if we were a democracy, they would be able to do whatever they wanted because Trump said they could. We are not a democracy, and whatever they suggest is going to have to go back through Congress because only Congress has the power to make or change laws. The executive branch enforces, this judicial branch interprets, and the congressional branch, the legislative branch, makes the laws. So regardless of what happens, it's going to have to go back through that filter of the U.S. Congress, and that's a good thing. We don't want it to be easy for someone to win an election and take over the country. And so we think that's a really good thing. But we also really appreciate Trump's approach that, hey, there's some things we're doing that are fundamentally broken, and we've got to upset the apple cart if we're going to get these things right quickly. And so we're excited about that. We'll see how it turns out. But it makes sense when you think about it from this perspective.
So if we understand the system of government our founders bequeathed to us, we will see why they preferred to describe it as a republic rather than a democracy. Of course, it has strong democratic elements, but America was not created to be a pure democracy for very good reasons. Those reasons remain as valid today as they were in 1789. We should not go along with those who today are demanding constitutional changes simply because this or that institution or procedure established by the Constitution, say the Senate or the Electoral College, is not democratic. More democratic doesn't necessarily mean better. It doesn't necessarily mean more just. Our founders understood this. So should we. We have a republic, and we should keep it. I'm Robert George, McCormick Professor of Jurisprudence and Director of the James Madison Program at Princeton University. for Prager University.
Okay, so there at the end, he said something really important. So simply because a large number of people believe something doesn't make it right, doesn't make it fair, doesn't make it just. At one point, almost everybody believed the earth was flat. That was wrong. At one point, almost everybody believed the earth was the center of the universe. That was wrong. At one point, everybody believed that chariot drug the sun across the sky because a Greek god was driving the chariot. That was clearly wrong too. You just think about all these instances where everybody was so certain they were right, and the majority of people thought one thing and they were dead wrong. A democracy is not a good place for us to be. We're fortunate that the founding fathers did what they did in terms of setting up our government as a republic instead of a democracy. We don't want to be a democracy. It's going to take us to a bad spot if we ever went down that road. So we thought it was a very good video. We feel very strongly about this particular issue, and we think it's very important for people to be educated and understand what it is they're advocating for when they say, get rid of the Electoral College, move to a democracy. We should elect the president through a popular vote. One person, one vote. It makes sense. It really doesn't when you stop and think about it. Now, like we said, we've got some things wrong with our government that we need to fix. Maybe Trump will fix them. Maybe he won't fix them. We're going to find out. But I don't think it could be worse than the path we were headed down in terms of the corruption and the nepotism. And just look at how many people in Congress become rich because their stock portfolios magically increase when and after they're in Congress. They must just get real lucky all of a sudden. When Nancy Pelosi's portfolio outperforms Warren Buffett's, you got to start asking questions. And I'm sure it's not just Nancy Pelosi. I'm certain there's other, I can't remember, I think it was Kelly Loeffler who lost the Senate race in Georgia in 2020, in 2016. Her and her husband had like an amazing return on their portfolio. And she just happened to be a senator. So this is nonpartisan. Both sides are absolutely guilty of it. Lots of things wrong with the government. With that said, we still haven't seen anywhere in the world a better form of government than the Democratic Republic that has been set up in the United States and has been pushing our country forward for the last 250 years. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you guys found that helpful. We find the subject very interesting. We feel strongly about it. We think it's very important that people are educated when they're making their decisions, when they're talking through things, and when they really think about how they want to proceed as a nation. So hope you guys found this useful. We enjoyed putting the episode together and talking through it with you. So James puts it up over here every day. Don't forget to go to our website, saltygingertalk.com. All of our podcast episodes are available there. We publish a weekday newsletter that you can subscribe to on our website, and links to all of our other social media content is on there as well. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel on whatever platform you catch our podcast on. We really appreciate the support. Appreciate you coming back and checking us out. Hope everybody has a great week, and we'll see you next time.